The auction block stood in the center of Tombstone's dusty Main Street, and Katherine Kendrick stood beside it with her chin held high, even though her heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. She had decided to sell everything that mattered, everything her late husband Thomas had promised her would someday become real. And the crowd gathering around her looked more curious than interested in actually spending their hard-earned money on what they probably considered the foolish fantasies of a grieving woman. It was September of 1885, and the Arizona Territory sun beat down mercilessly on the assembled townspeople. Katherine had been a widow for 8 months now, ever since the mine collapse that took Thomas and 7 other men. The silver mine where he had worked had been his job, not his passion. His passion had been the stack of carefully drawn plans, the notebooks filled with calculations, the dreams he would share with her every night by lamplight about what they would build together once they had saved enough money. Now those dreams sat in 3 wooden crates beside the auction block, and Katherine knew she had no choice but to let them go. The debts Thomas had left behind were substantial medical bills from an illness 2 years prior that had nearly taken him before the mine eventually did. The small house they had rented would need to be vacated by the end of the month, and she had exactly $42 to her name. "What exactly are you selling, Mrs. Kendrick?" called out Harold Timmons, who ran the general store. His voice held a note of skepticism that made Katherine's spine stiffen. "Architectural plans," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "Plans for a hotel unlike any this territory has ever seen. 3 stories, with indoor plumbing innovations, a dining hall that can seat 100 guests, and a design that will keep the building cool in summer and warm in winter through a series of ventilation shafts and strategic window placement." A few men chuckled. One woman shook her head sadly. Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she pressed on. "There are also plans for a water irrigation system that could transform dry land into productive farmland, utilizing underground springs and a series of aqueducts. My husband spent 5 years developing these designs. He was a brilliant man, and these dreams deserve to become real." "Your husband was a mine worker, madam," someone called out. "No disrespect to the dead, but what would he know about fancy hotels and irrigation?" Katherine opened her mouth to explain that Thomas had studied engineering in Philadelphia before they had married, before circumstances had forced them west to find work wherever they could, but a new voice cut through the crowd. "I will give you $500 for everything." The crowd parted, and Katherine saw him for the first time. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his clean but well-worn shirt. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, and they looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He wore a cowboy's clothes, dusty boots and denim pants, a leather vest over his shirt, but there was something different about him, something in the way he carried himself that spoke of education and purpose beyond simple ranch work. "Quinn Zachary," he said, removing his hat as he approached the auction block. "I have been looking for plans exactly like what you have described, Mrs. Kendrick. I would like to examine them, if I may, but if they are what I believe them to be, I will pay you $1,000 for the complete collection." The crowd erupted in whispers. $1,000 was more money than most of them saw in 2 years of hard work. Katherine felt dizzy. "You have not even seen them," she managed to say. "How can you make such an offer?" Quinn Zachary smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer. "Because I have been riding through this territory for 3 months, talking to every engineer, every architect, every person with vision about what this land could become. And what you have described tells me that your husband understood something most men do not. This land is not meant to be conquered with brute force. It is meant to be understood, worked with, turned into something sustainable and lasting. He climbed the 2 steps to stand beside her on the platform, and Katherine caught the scent of leather and sage and something crisp like mountain air. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps only 30 or 31. She herself had just turned 27 3 weeks ago, alone in the small house, with no one to mark the occasion. "May I?" Quinn asked, gesturing to the first crate. Katherine nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched as he carefully removed the lid and began to pull out Thomas's notebooks and rolled plans. He unrolled the first one, the hotel design, and his eyes moved rapidly across the paper. His expression grew more focused, more excited, and he pulled out a second plan, then a third. "This is remarkable," he breathed. "The way he has designed the foundation to account for the shifting sand and rock, the drainage system to channel rainwater into cisterns rather than letting it run off and cause erosion, and this heating system using thermal mass. It is brilliant." He looked up at Katherine with something like awe. "Did you help him develop these plans?" "I drafted many of them," Katherine admitted. "Thomas would work out the mathematics and the engineering principles, and I would draw them to scale. He taught me how to read architectural drawings, how to understand the calculations. We worked on them together every evening for 5 years." Quinn carefully rolled the plans back up and replaced them in the crate. Then he turned to face the crowd, still standing beside Katherine on the platform. "I will give Mrs. Kendrick $1,000, he announced. "And I will build every one of these dreams into reality, right here in Tombstone. I will need workers, skilled craftsmen, laborers, suppliers. This town is going to grow, and everyone here will have the opportunity to be part of it." The crowd's whispers turned into excited chatter. Harold Timmons called out, "You got that kind of money, stranger. That is a mighty big claim." Quinn reached into his vest and pulled out a leather wallet. He extracted a banknote and held it up. "I have the funds and I have the land. I purchased the old Mackenzie Ranch 2 weeks ago, 500 acres of it. Half of that land sits over an underground spring system that has never been properly tapped. With the right irrigation, it will support crops, livestock, and a town 3 times the size of what Tombstone is now." He turned back to Katherine. "But I will not buy these plans unless you agree to one condition." Katherine's hope faltered. Here it came, whatever catch would make this too good to be true. "What condition?" "That you work with me to make them real," Quinn said. "These are your dreams as much as they were your husband's. You understand them, you helped create them. I can provide the funding and the labor, but I need someone who understands the vision behind every line and calculation. I need you, Mrs. Kendrick." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Katherine gripped the edge of the auction block to steady herself. "I am not an engineer, Mr. Zachary. I have no formal training." "You have something better," Quinn said quietly, his gray-green eyes holding hers. "You have passion, and you have intimate knowledge of these designs. I will pay you a salary, $50 a month, plus room and board. You will oversee the implementation of every plan, making sure they are built exactly as intended." $50 a month. Katherine's mind reeled. That was more than Thomas had made in the mine. More than she could make taking in laundry or working as a seamstress for the next several years. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Quinn's expression grew serious. "Because I have money, Mrs. Kendrick, more than I need from an inheritance I never asked for. My father built a railroad empire back east, and when he died, he left everything to me, his only son. But I did not want to live that life, surrounded by society dinners and business meetings in stuffy boardrooms. I wanted to build something real, something that matters. I came west to find purpose, and I have been searching for the right vision to invest in. Your husband's dreams, your dreams, they are exactly what I have been looking for." He held out his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Katherine looked at his outstretched hand, then at the 3 crates containing 5 years of late-night work, of whispered dreams, of Thomas's brilliant mind captured on paper. She thought about the little house she would have to vacate, about the debts hanging over her head, about the uncertain future she had been facing just an hour ago. She placed her hand in Quinn's, and his fingers closed around hers, warm and strong and sure. "We have an agreement, Mr. Zachary." The crowd applauded, and Katherine felt tears sting her eyes. Quinn gave her hand a gentle squeeze before releasing it, then turned to address the gathering again. "We will begin hiring next week," he announced. "Carpenters, masons, laborers, anyone willing to work hard for fair wages. Spread the word throughout the territory. Tombstone is about to become something special." The next few hours passed in a blur. Quinn paid her the $1,000 in banknotes that she immediately took to the Tombstone Bank and Trust, paying off every one of Thomas's debts and depositing the rest. The feeling of walking out of that bank with a clear conscience and money still in her account made her feel lighter than she had in years. When she returned to the main street, Quinn was loading the crates into a sturdy wagon. He looked up as she approached. "I have taken rooms at the Grand Hotel," he said. "It is nothing fancy, but it is clean. I have arranged for a separate room for you there, Mrs. Kendrick, until we can build you something more permanent. Is there anything you need to collect from your current residence?" "Everything I own," Katherine said, "but it will fit in 2 trunks and a few boxes." "Then let us go collect it," Quinn said simply. They drove through the dusty streets in Quinn's wagon, and Katherine directed him to the small adobe house at the edge of town. It looked even more shabby and small than usual, the walls cracked from the desert heat, the roof patched in several places where leaks had developed during the rare rainstorms. Quinn helped her carry out her belongings, and Katherine was acutely aware of how meager they were. 2 trunks of clothes, a box of kitchen items, another box containing her few books and personal treasures, and the small wooden chest that held her marriage certificate and the letters Thomas had written her during their courtship. "Is this everything?" Quinn asked, and there was no judgment in his voice, only gentle inquiry. "This is everything," Katherine confirmed. As Quinn loaded the last trunk, Katherine took one final look at the house where she had spent 3 years with Thomas, where they had laughed and argued and dreamed together, where she had nursed him through his illness, where she had waited up anxiously every night until he came home safely from the mine, where she had finally received the news that he would not be coming home ever again. "Goodbye," she whispered, then climbed up onto the wagon seat beside Quinn. They rode back to the Grand Hotel in comfortable silence. The sun was beginning to set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and pink and deep purple. Katherine breathed in the cooling evening air and allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in 8 months. Hope. Quinn carried her trunks up to the second-floor room he had arranged for her. It was small but clean, with a real bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over Tombstone's Main Street. It was luxury compared to what she had been living in. "Get settled," Quinn said from the doorway. "Then join me for dinner downstairs if you would like. We have much to discuss about how we will proceed." Katherine nodded, suddenly feeling shy. This man was now her employer, her partner in bringing Thomas's dreams to life, and she barely knew him. As if sensing her uncertainty, Quinn smiled. "Mrs. Kendrick, I know this is all happening very fast. If you need time to think, to rest, I understand. But I want you to know that I meant every word I said today. I believe in these plans and I believe in you." After he left, Katherine sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long breath. She opened the wooden chest and pulled out the small daguerreotype photograph of Thomas. He looked so serious in it, so young, though it had only been taken 3 years ago. He had been 28 when he died, just a year older than she was now. "I am going to make them real, Thomas," she whispered to the image. "Every dream we talked about, I am going to see them built." She changed into her best dress, a dark blue cotton that was respectable if not fashionable, and pinned her dark blonde hair into a neat bun. Then she went downstairs to the hotel dining room. Quinn stood when she entered and pulled out a chair for her. He had cleaned up as well, his dark hair still damp from washing, his shirt changed to a fresh one. They ordered simple fare, beef stew and bread and coffee that was surprisingly good. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Zachary," Katherine said as they ate. "You said your father built a railroad empire. Why would you leave that behind?" Quinn was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "My father was a hard man, Mrs. Kendrick, brilliant, driven, but hard. He built his fortune by being ruthless, by crushing competitors, by seeing people as resources to be used. When I was 20, I tried to work with him, tried to learn the business. But I saw what it did to people, the towns that died when the railroad went through and destroyed local businesses, the workers injured or killed because safety measures cut into profits." He looked up at her, and Katherine saw old pain in his eyes. "We had a terrible argument about it. I told him I wanted no part of building an empire on the backs of broken people. He told me I was soft, that I did not have what it took to survive in the real world. We barely spoke for the next 5 years. Then he had a heart attack and died in his office, alone, surrounded by all his money and success." "I am sorry," Katherine said softly. Quinn shrugged. "He left me everything, along with a letter that I think was the closest he ever came to an apology. He wrote that he hoped I would use the money to build something better than he had, so that is what I intend to do." "And you chose the Arizona Territory," Katherine said. "I chose freedom," Quinn corrected. "Out here, I can build something new, something that helps people rather than exploiting them. When I heard about your auction today, about a widow selling her dreams, something told me I needed to be there. And when I saw those plans, I knew. This is what I have been looking for." They talked long into the evening about the plans, about which project to start with, about the logistics of acquiring materials and hiring workers. Quinn had already surveyed the land he had purchased, and he pulled out his own rough maps to show Katherine where he thought the hotel should be built, where the irrigation system could be implemented. Katherine found herself warming to him, to his enthusiasm and his genuine desire to do good with his resources. He listened when she spoke, really listened, and asked her opinion on everything. It was a novel experience. Thomas had loved her, but he had been a man of his time, often patting her hand and making decisions without consulting her. Quinn treated her like an equal partner, and it was both thrilling and slightly terrifying. Over the next 2 weeks, they worked from dawn until dark, preparing for construction to begin. Quinn hired a crew of 20 men, carefully selecting workers who came with good references and reputations for quality craftsmanship. Katherine worked alongside him, interviewing candidates, reviewing their qualifications, and explaining the vision behind each project. They decided to start with the irrigation system, as it would be the foundation for everything else. If they could prove that the underground springs could be tapped and channeled to transform the arid land into productive farmland, it would draw settlers and create the need for the hotel and other structures. Katherine spent her days at the construction site, often on horseback riding alongside Quinn as they surveyed the land and marked where the aqueducts would run. She wore split skirts that scandalized some of the more conservative townswomen, but she did not care. She could not do her job in a traditional dress, and Quinn had made it clear that her job was essential. The workers initially seemed uncertain about taking direction from a woman, but Katherine quickly proved herself. When one of the carpenters questioned the angle of a water channel, she pulled out the plans and walked him through the mathematics, explaining how the gradient was calculated to ensure proper water flow without erosion. When a laborer wanted to shortcut the depth of a foundation post, she explained exactly why the depth was necessary and what would happen if they did not dig deep enough. Quinn watched these interactions with barely concealed pride, and Katherine found herself becoming more confident with each passing day. They often ate dinner together, sometimes at the hotel, sometimes at one of the small restaurants that had sprung up to serve Tombstone's growing population. They talked about everything, their conversations ranging from the technical details of construction to their childhoods, their hopes, their fears. Katherine learned that Quinn had grown up lonely, an only child in a mansion full of servants but devoid of real warmth. His mother had died when he was young, and his father had poured himself into building his business empire, leaving Quinn largely to his own devices. He had educated himself by reading everything he could find in his father's extensive library, and had developed a passion for engineering and architecture. In turn, Katherine shared her own story. She had grown up in St. Louis, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a seamstress. Her parents had died of cholera when she was 18, and she had met Thomas a month later at a church social. He had been kind and attentive, and when he proposed marriage after a brief courtship, she had accepted, grateful for the stability and companionship he offered. They had moved west seeking opportunity, full of hope and plans. The reality had been harder than either of them had anticipated, but they had clung to their dreams of what could be. "You miss him?" Quinn asked one evening as they sat on the hotel porch, watching the sun set over the desert. Katherine considered the question carefully. "I miss who we were together," she said finally. "I miss having a partner, someone to share the daily moments with. But if I am honest, Mr. Zachary, Thomas and I married young, and we were still figuring out who we were. I loved him, but I wonder sometimes if we would have grown into true partners or grown apart." She looked at Quinn, expecting to see judgment, but saw only understanding. "Is that terrible to say?" "It is honest," Quinn said, "and honesty is never terrible." By the end of the first month, the irrigation project was well underway. The workers had located 3 underground springs exactly where Thomas's calculations had predicted they would be, and the first channels had been dug and lined with stone to prevent erosion. When they opened the flow from the first spring, Katherine stood beside Quinn and watched as water began to run through the channels, spreading out across the marked fields. "It works," she breathed, hardly able to believe it. "Thomas's design actually works." Quinn turned to her, his face lit with joy. "Of course it works. It was brilliant. He was brilliant, and so are you." He caught her hands in his, a spontaneous gesture of celebration, and Katherine felt a jolt of electricity run through her at his touch. Their eyes met, and for a long moment they stood there, hands clasped, something unspoken passing between them. Quinn released her hands abruptly, taking a step back. "Forgive me, Mrs. Kendrick, I got carried away in the excitement." "Katherine," she said impulsively. "Please call me Katherine." "We have been working together every day for a month. Mrs. Kendrick feels too formal." Quinn smiled, slow and warm. "Katherine, and you should call me Quinn." "Quinn," she repeated, and liked the way his name felt in her mouth. The irrigation success drew attention from throughout the territory. Farmers and ranchers came to see the system. and several immediately approached Quinn about purchasing water rights or hiring him to design similar systems for their land. Quinn discussed each proposal with Katherine, and together they decided to take on 3 more irrigation projects, hiring additional workers to handle the increased workload. They began planning for the hotel next. Quinn had purchased additional land in the center of Tombstone's growing business district, and Katherine spent hours refining Thomas's original plans, adapting them to the specific site while maintaining the innovative features that made the design special. She was bent over a drafting table in the small office Quinn had rented one afternoon, working on the ventilation system drawings, when he came in carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. "You have been working for 6 hours straight," he said, setting one glass beside her. "Take a break." Katherine straightened, pressing her hands to the small of her back to ease the stiffness. "I want to finish this section before I lose the light." Quinn moved to stand beside her, looking at the drawings. He was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the clean scent of the soap he used. Katherine found herself acutely aware of his presence in a way that made her heart beat faster. "This is excellent work," Quinn said, pointing to the series of shafts and vents she had drawn. "You have improved on the original design, made it more efficient." "Do you think so?" Katherine asked, pleased. "I thought if we angled these upper vents differently, we could capture more of the prevailing winds." They discussed the modifications, their heads bent close together over the drawings, and Katherine was struck by how natural this felt, how right it seemed to be creating something together. When Quinn left to check on one of the construction sites, Katherine sat back and pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks. She was developing feelings for Quinn Zachary, feelings that went well beyond professional respect or simple friendship. The realization both excited and frightened her. She had been a widow for only 10 months. Was it wrong to feel this way so soon? What would people say? What would Thomas think? But even as she questioned herself, Katherine knew the truth. Thomas would want her to be happy. He had told her as much during his final days, when the illness had wasted him to almost nothing, and they both knew he would not recover. "Promise me you will live, Kate," he had whispered, using his pet name for her. "Promise me you will not shut yourself away in grief. Find joy again. Find love again if you can. I want that for you." She had promised, though at the time she could not imagine ever feeling anything for another man. Now, months later, she found herself thinking about Quinn constantly. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the deep rumble of his laugh, the careful way he touched her elbow when helping her onto a horse or down from the wagon. The passionate way he talked about their projects, the respect he showed every worker regardless of their station, the kindness he demonstrated in 100 small ways. Katherine made a decision. She would not act on these feelings, not yet. It was too soon, and she needed to be certain they were real and not just gratitude or loneliness. But she would not deny them either. She would let herself feel, and she would see where it led. The weeks turned into months. By Christmas of 1885, the irrigation system was complete and functioning beautifully. 4 large farms were now cultivating land that had been barren desert just months before. The hotel construction had begun, with the foundation laid and the first floor walls going up. Quinn had hired additional architects and engineers to help implement other plans from Thomas's notebooks, including a revolutionary windmill design for pumping water and a schoolhouse with large windows, specifically positioned to maximize natural light for students. Tombstone was thriving, growing almost daily as word spread about the opportunities Quinn's projects were creating. The town's population had nearly doubled, and new businesses were opening to serve the influx of workers and their families. Katherine had moved from the hotel to a small house Quinn had built for her on the edge of his property. It was a beautiful little structure, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a modern stove, and a sitting room with large windows. Quinn had insisted she needed her own space, a place that was truly hers. What he did not know was that Katherine lay awake most nights in her comfortable bed, wishing he were closer. They spent almost every day together, working side by side, but maintained a careful professional distance. Quinn was unfailingly respectful, never crossing the line from colleague to something more, though Katherine sometimes caught him looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. Christmas Eve found them working late in the office, reviewing plans for the hotel's 2nd floor. A cold wind rattled the windows, unusual for the Arizona territory but not unheard of in late December. "We should stop," Quinn said finally, setting down his pencil. "It is Christmas Eve, Katherine. Even we deserve an evening off." Katherine smiled. "I suppose you are right." Though I was making good progress on the dining hall layout. "It will still be there tomorrow," Quinn said. He stood and stretched, then moved to the small stove in the corner to check the fire. "Do you have plans for tomorrow, Mrs. Henderson invited me to Christmas dinner at her boarding house," Katherine said. Mrs. Henderson was a kind older woman who had taken Katherine under her wing. "What about you?" "I will probably work," Quinn said with a shrug. "Christmas is just another day when you have no family." Katherine felt a surge of sympathy. "You could come to Mrs. Henderson's with me. She always makes far too much food and she loves having guests." Quinn turned to look at her, the firelight casting shadows across his handsome face. "I would not want to impose." "You would not be imposing," Katherine assured him. "Please come. No one should be alone on Christmas." Something shifted in Quinn's expression, a softness entering his eyes. "Then I would be honored to accompany you." They cleaned up the office and Quinn walked Katherine back to her little house as he did most evenings. The sky was clear and brilliant with stars, the air crisp and cold. At Katherine's front door, Quinn paused. "I have something for you," he said. "A Christmas gift. May I give it to you now?" Katherine felt flustered. "I did not get you anything. I did not think we were exchanging gifts." "I do not need anything," Quinn said, "but I saw this and I thought of you. Please, wait here." He jogged back to his horse and retrieved a wrapped package from his saddlebag. It was about the size of a book, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Katherine took it with trembling hands and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal, the cover embossed with her initials. She opened it to find heavy, cream-colored pages, perfect for drawing or writing. "For your own designs," Quinn said softly. "You have been bringing Thomas's dreams to life, but I thought it was time you had a place to record your own dreams." Katherine felt tears sting her eyes. It was the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given her. "Quinn, this is beautiful, thank you." She looked up at him and found him standing very close, his eyes intense in the starlight. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Quinn reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. "Katherine," he said, his voice rough. "I know it has not been long, I know it may be too soon. But I need you to know that my feelings for you have become more than professional respect, more than friendship. I think about you constantly. I wake up looking forward to seeing you, and I go to sleep wishing the day had been longer so I could have spent more time with you." Katherine's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Quinn, you do not have to say anything," he continued. "I am not asking you for anything, I just needed you to know, because keeping it inside was becoming impossible." Katherine made a decision. She stepped closer to him, closing the distance between them, and placed her hand on his chest. She could feel his heart racing beneath her palm. "I think about you too," she whispered. "All the time. And it terrifies me because it has only been 10 months since Thomas died, and I worry what people will think, what they will say. But Quinn, when I am with you, I feel alive in a way I have not felt in years. Maybe ever." Quinn covered her hand with his own, pressing it more firmly against his heart. "I do not care what people say, but I care about you, and I do not want to rush you or pressure you. We can take this as slowly as you need." Katherine laughed softly. "I have never been very good at going slow when I know what I want." She rose up on her toes, and Quinn met her halfway, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was gentle and searching and full of restrained passion. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and Katherine melted into his embrace, her hands sliding up to clasp behind his neck. The kiss deepened, and Katherine felt like every nerve in her body was alive, sparking with sensation. This was different from kissing Thomas, different from anything she had experienced before. This felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "Katherine Kendrick, you are extraordinary." "Just Katherine," she said. "I think it is time I stopped being Mrs. Kendrick, widow. I want to be just Katherine." Quinn smiled and kissed her again, softer this time. "Just Katherine, though there is nothing just about you." Christmas dinner at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house was a lively affair, with 12 guests crowded around the long table. Katherine and Quinn sat side by side, and though they tried to maintain a professional demeanor, Katherine caught Mrs. Henderson watching them with knowing eyes and a pleased smile. After dinner, Quinn walked Katherine home again, and this time when they reached her door, he did not hesitate to pull her into his arms and kiss her thoroughly. "I should let you get some rest," he murmured against her lips. "You should," Katherine agreed, but made no move to go inside. Quinn laughed, the sound warm and happy. "Tomorrow, would you like to go riding with me? There is a place on the property I want to show you, a canyon with a spring that feeds into our irrigation system. It is beautiful." "I would love that," Katherine said. They went riding the next day, and the day after that. They fell into a new pattern, working together during the day and spending their evenings together, talking and laughing and slowly building something real between them. The town noticed, of course. Tombstone was too small for anything to remain secret for long. Katherine heard the whispers, saw the disapproving looks from some of the more conservative townspeople who thought she should mourn for at least a year before even considering another man. But she also received support from unexpected quarters. Mrs. Henderson told her firmly that life was too short to waste on worrying about what narrow-minded people thought. Several of the workers who had known Thomas told Katherine that he had been a good man who would want her to be happy. And Harold Timmons, the general store owner who had been skeptical at her auction, surprised her by saying that anyone could see she and Quinn were good for each other. The hotel construction continued through the spring of 1886. Katherine and Quinn worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's thoughts, finishing each other's sentences. The building rose story by story, exactly as Thomas had designed it, with all the innovative features intact. In April, Quinn asked Katherine to marry him. They were at the construction site, watching the workers install the revolutionary ventilation system on the 3rd floor. Quinn took her hand and led her away from the noise and activity, to a quiet spot where they could see the whole building. "Katherine," he said, taking both her hands in his. "This hotel is amazing, but it is not the most beautiful thing I have helped create this year. The most beautiful thing is what we have built together, this relationship, this partnership. I love you. I love your brilliant mind, your determination, your kindness, your strength. I love the way you laugh, the way you argue with me when you think I am wrong, the way you look at me like I am someone worth believing in." He pulled out a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "I know we have only been courting for a few months. I know some people will say it is too fast, but Katherine, I have never been more certain of anything. Will you marry me?" Katherine felt joy bubble up inside her, pure and bright. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Quinn, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, deep and passionate, not caring that they were in full view of the construction workers. The men noticed and began to cheer and whistle, and Quinn laughed against Katherine's lips. "I think our secret is well and truly out now," he said. They were married in June, in a simple ceremony at the newly completed Tombstone Community Church, another of Thomas's designs that Quinn had funded. Mrs. Henderson stood up with Katherine, and Quinn's foreman, a good man named Robert Chen, stood up with him. Katherine wore a cream-colored dress that she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs. She carried a bouquet of desert wildflowers. Quinn wore a new suit, dark and well-tailored, and looked so handsome that Katherine's breath caught when she saw him waiting for her at the altar. They exchanged vows in front of nearly 100 people, almost the entire population of Tombstone and the surrounding farms. Katherine promised to love, honor, and cherish Quinn, and he promised the same to her. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, Quinn kissed her with such tenderness and joy that Katherine felt her heart might burst. The celebration afterward was held in the newly completed hotel dining hall, its first official use. The ventilation system worked perfectly, keeping the large room comfortable despite the June heat. Tables were laden with food contributed by almost everyone in town, and there was music and dancing late into the night. As Katherine danced with her new husband, she caught sight of the daguerreotype of Thomas that she had brought and placed on a small memorial table in the corner, along with photographs of other lost loved ones that guests had contributed. She had worried it might be strange to have Thomas's image at her wedding to another man, but it felt right. Thomas had been part of her journey, part of what had brought her to this moment. "Thank you," she whispered silently to the photograph. "Thank you for dreaming with me. I will make them all real, I promise." Quinn followed her gaze and understood. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "He would be happy for you," he said quietly. "Anyone who loved you would want this for you." After the celebration, they went home to the house Quinn had built for them. It was larger than Katherine's first little house, with 3 bedrooms, a study where they could work on plans together, and a wide porch that looked out over the irrigated fields. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a joining of not just bodies but souls. Quinn was patient and attentive, making sure Katherine felt cherished and desired. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, talking in soft voices about their future. "I want to build a school next," Katherine said, tracing patterns on Quinn's chest. "A real school with a library and science laboratory. Thomas designed one, but we never thought we would see it built." "Then we will build it," Quinn said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "We will build everything in those notebooks, and then we will design new things together. We will fill that journal I gave you with your own dreams, and we will make those real too." The summer passed in a haze of happiness and productivity. The hotel opened in August with a grand celebration, and within a week, it was fully booked with guests from all over the territory. The revolutionary design was everything Katherine and Thomas had envisioned, comfortable and elegant, and perfectly suited to the desert climate. Revenue from the hotel and the irrigation system leases provided steady income that Quinn immediately invested in more community projects. They broke ground on the school in September, and Katherine threw herself into overseeing every detail of the construction. In October, Katherine realized her monthly courses were late. When 2 weeks passed and still nothing came, she allowed herself to hope. She visited the town doctor, who confirmed what she had suspected. She was pregnant. Katherine walked home in a daze of joy and terror. She was going to have a baby, Quinn's baby. The thought filled her with such happiness that she could barely contain it, but also with fear. Childbirth was dangerous, and she had already lost so much in her life. Quinn was in the study when she arrived home, bent over plans for a new irrigation project. He looked up when she entered and immediately set down his pencil. "What is wrong?" he asked, coming to her. "You look pale. Are you unwell?" Katherine laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "I am pregnant, Quinn. We are going to have a baby." Quinn's eyes went wide. For a moment he just stared at her, and Katherine felt a flutter of uncertainty. They had never discussed children, had been married only 4 months. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around before carefully setting her back on her feet. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Katherine, you have made me the happiest man alive. Are you happy? Do you want this?" "Yes," Katherine said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I am terrified, but I am so happy, Quinn, so very happy." He kissed her deeply, then dropped to his knees and pressed his face to her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I am your father, and I promise you I will do everything in my power to give you a good life, to make you feel loved and safe and valued every single day." Katherine ran her fingers through his dark hair, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. This man, this beautiful, generous, loving man, was her husband and the father of her child. Sometimes she could hardly believe how her life had transformed in just over a year. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and winter. Katherine continued to work on the school construction as long as she was able, only reluctantly agreeing to rest more as her belly grew large. Quinn was attentive and protective, sometimes overly so, until Katherine had to remind him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time, and she was perfectly capable of walking to the construction site without assistance. Their son was born on a warm day in late May of 1887, after a labor that lasted 12 hours. Katherine gripped Quinn's hand through the worst of it, and when the doctor finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, she felt a surge of love so fierce it took her breath away. "What should we name him?" Quinn asked, his voice hoarse with emotion as he looked at their son. Katherine had been thinking about this for months. "Thomas," she said softly. "Thomas Quinn Zachary, so that your father and my first husband are both remembered, both part of our family's story." Quinn's eyes filled with tears. He kissed Katherine's forehead, then gently touched the baby's tiny hand. "Thomas Quinn Zachary. It is perfect." Baby Thomas was a healthy, happy infant who seemed to enjoy being carried around construction sites in a sling on his mother's chest. Katherine refused to be confined to the house for long, and by the time Thomas was 2 months old, she was back at work, the baby napping in a basket in whatever office or site she was working at that day. The school was completed that fall, a beautiful building with large windows, modern desks, and a library that Quinn had stocked with hundreds of books ordered from back east. They hired 2 teachers, and enrollment quickly filled with children from Tombstone and the surrounding farms. Katherine stood at the school's opening ceremony with Thomas in her arms and Quinn's arm around her shoulders, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This had been one of her and Thomas Kendrick's dreams, and now it was real, solid, serving the community. Over the next 2 years, they continued to build. a medical clinic with modern equipment, a community center with meeting rooms and a performance hall, a library building separate from the school. Each project employed local workers and brought more families to the area, and Tombstone transformed from a rough mining town into a thriving, cultured community. Katherine filled the journal Quinn had given her with her own designs, ideas that built on Thomas's engineering principles but were entirely her own. A greenhouse that could extend the growing season for crops, a water tower with a pressure system that could provide running water to homes, a covered market where farmers could sell their produce protected from the brutal summer sun. Quinn enthusiastically supported every idea, working with her to refine the designs and secure funding and labor to build them. They were true partners in every sense, equal collaborators in creating something meaningful. In the spring of 1889, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, and she was forced to rest more as she carried the child. Their daughter was born in December, a tiny thing with dark hair like Quinn's and Katherine's determination evident even in infancy. They named her Emily Rose, and she was welcomed into the world by her 3-year-old brother, who was fascinated by the baby and wanted to help with everything. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Quinn and Katherine continued their work, now balancing it with raising their children. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who loved following his father around and asking endless questions about how things worked. Emily was more reserved but equally intelligent, showing an early talent for drawing. By 1892, Tombstone had grown into a prosperous town of over 2,000 people. The irrigation system had transformed thousands of acres of desert into productive farmland. The hotel was famous throughout the territory for its comfort and innovative design. The school had expanded to include secondary education. And Katherine and Quinn had become respected leaders in the community, known for their vision, their generosity, and their genuine care for the people who lived there. One evening in late spring, Katherine and Quinn sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard. Thomas, now 5, was building an elaborate structure with wooden blocks, while 2-year-old Emily carefully arranged flowers she had picked. "You ever think about that day at the auction?" Quinn asked, taking Katherine's hand. Katherine smiled. "I think about it often. I was so desperate, so afraid. I thought I was selling away the last pieces of my life with Thomas, the last pieces of our dreams." "Instead, you were buying a new life," Quinn said. "A different dream." "A better dream," Katherine corrected. "Thomas was a good man, and I will always be grateful for the years we had together, for the foundation he gave me. But Quinn, what we have built together, it is more than I ever imagined possible. You did not just buy those plans. You believed in them and in me. You made me believe I could be more than just the woman who drafted someone else's designs." Quinn brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "You have always been extraordinary, Katherine. I just gave you the opportunity to show the world what I saw from the very first moment." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set in brilliant colors across the desert sky. The irrigated fields stretched out before them, green and thriving. In the distance, they could see the town they had helped build, lights beginning to glow in windows as families settled in for the evening. "I want to start something new," Katherine said suddenly. "A training program for women who want to learn architecture and engineering. So many girls have intelligence and talent, but no opportunity to develop it. We could change that." Quinn turned to her, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "That is a brilliant idea. We could build a dedicated facility, bring in instructors, offer scholarships." They began planning immediately, as they always did, feeding off each other's ideas and energy. By the time they called the children in for dinner, they had sketched out the basic concept for what would become the Southwest Academy for Women's Technical Education. Over the next 3 years, they brought that dream to reality as well. The academy opened in 1895, offering courses in architecture, engineering, mathematics, and sciences to young women from across the territory. Katherine taught many of the classes herself, passing on everything she had learned to a new generation of women who would go on to design and build amazing things. In 1896, Katherine realized she was pregnant again at the age of 38. It was unexpected, and the pregnancy was difficult, leaving her bedridden for much of it. Quinn was terrified of losing her, hovering anxiously and calling the doctor at every small concern. "I am not made of glass," Katherine told him one afternoon, exasperated but touched by his worry. "Women have babies at my age all the time." "Not my wife," Quinn said firmly. "You are precious cargo, and I will not take any chances." Their second son was born healthy in early 1897, a robust baby who looked like a miniature version of Quinn. They named him James, and he completed their family in a way Katherine had not known was missing. Thomas, now 10, took his role as big brother seriously, helping to watch over Emily and the new baby. Emily, at 7, was already showing talent in mathematics and design, often sitting beside her mother and watching her work with keen interest. The years passed in a blur of work and family, and watching their children grow. Thomas announced at 15 that he wanted to study engineering like his mother, and Katherine felt pride swell in her chest. Emily decided she wanted to be an architect, and began attending classes at the academy her mother had founded. James, the youngest, was still finding his way but showed an early aptitude for understanding mechanical systems. In 1905, on their 19th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised Katherine with a gift. He led her to the site of her very first auction, the spot where she had stood with her 3 crates of dreams, desperate and afraid. "I bought this plot of land," he said, "and I had something made." He unveiled a bronze plaque mounted on a stone marker. It read, "On this spot in September 1885, Katherine Kendrick offered her dreams for sale. Quinn Zachary bought them, and together they made them real. This town stands as testament to the power of vision, partnership, and love." Katherine felt tears stream down her face as she read the words. "Quinn, this is beautiful. You are beautiful," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You have been the greatest adventure of my life, Katherine. Every day with you has been a gift." Katherine kissed him, deep and passionate, not caring that they were in the middle of town in broad daylight. After 19 years of marriage, she still felt the same spark of attraction, the same sense of coming home whenever she was in his arms. "I love you," she said when they finally broke apart. "I will love you forever." They walked home hand in hand, through the town they had built together. The hotel still stood proud and beautiful, recently renovated but maintaining all its original innovative features. The irrigation system had been expanded multiple times and now watered nearly 10,000 acres. The school had grown into a full educational complex. The academy was graduating its 10th class of women engineers and architects, and everywhere they looked, they saw evidence of dreams made real. That evening, their entire family gathered for a celebration dinner. Thomas was home from university, where he was studying advanced engineering. Emily had just been commissioned to design a courthouse for a neighboring town, her first major solo project. James, now 8, regaled them with stories of the mechanical toy he was building. As Katherine looked around the table at Quinn, at their children, at the life they had built together, she felt overwhelming gratitude. She thought of that terrified widow standing at the auction block, convinced she was selling away her last hope. She had been selling her dreams, but not in the way she had thought. She had been offering them to the universe, trusting that somehow, some way, they would find their way to fruition. And the universe had sent her Quinn, a visionary cowboy with money and determination, and a heart big enough to believe in her and in possibilities. Together, they had taken those carefully drawn plans, those whispered late-night conversations, those calculations and measurements, and made them solid and real. But more than that, they had created a partnership based on mutual respect, shared vision, and deep love. The dreams in those wooden crates had been made real, every single one. And in the process, Katherine and Quinn had created something even more precious. A love story, a family, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Years later, when Katherine was 72 and Quinn was 76, they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset as they had done countless times before. Their children were grown, all successful in their own right. Their grandchildren numbered 12, and several of them were already showing interest in continuing the family tradition of building and creating. Quinn's health was failing, his heart growing weaker with each passing month. Katherine knew their time together was drawing to a close, and while the thought broke her heart, she also felt at peace. They had lived a full life, rich with purpose and love. "You have any regrets?" Quinn asked her one evening, his voice thin but his hand still strong as it held hers. Katherine thought about the question carefully. "I regret nothing," she said finally. "Every choice, every challenge, every joy, it all led to this, to us, to the life we built. How could I regret any of that?" Quinn smiled, the same smile that had captured her heart 40 years ago. "I was hoping you would say that. Because Katherine, marrying you, building this life with you, it has been the greatest privilege of my existence. You took a rich man with too much money and no purpose, and you gave me something to believe in, someone to believe in." "We believed in each other," Katherine corrected softly. "That is what made it work." Quinn passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later, with Katherine holding his hand. The town of Tombstone mourned the loss of one of its founders, and hundreds of people attended his funeral. Katherine stood strong through it all, comforted by her children and grandchildren, drawing strength from the knowledge that she and Quinn had loved each other fully and completely, with no words left unsaid, no love unexpressed. After the funeral, Katherine found a letter Quinn had left for her, sealed and marked with her name. She opened it with trembling hands. "My dearest Katherine," it read, "if you are reading this, then I have gone ahead of you on the next great adventure. Do not mourn me for too long, my love. We had more happiness in our 40 years together than most people find in several lifetimes. You gave me purpose, passion, and a love that sustained me through every day. I hope I gave you the same. Continue to dream, my darling. Continue to create. Continue to believe in the impossible. And know that wherever I am watching you with pride and love. Until we meet again, your devoted husband, Quinn." Katherine folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her heart. Then she went to her study, to the journal Quinn had given her so many years ago. It was nearly full now, page after page of designs and dreams and ideas. She turned to a fresh page and began to draw. Katherine Kendrick Zachary lived for another 8 years, remaining active and engaged until the very end. She continued to teach at the academy, mentored dozens of young women engineers and architects, and designed several more innovative projects that were built throughout the territory. When she passed away peacefully at the age of 80, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, the town of Tombstone held a week of mourning for the woman who had helped shape it. Her funeral was attended by over 1,000 people, including former students, colleagues, and people whose lives had been touched by her vision and kindness. She was buried beside Quinn in the cemetery overlooking the town they had built, under a headstone that read, Katherine Kendrick Zachary, 1858–1938. She dared to dream and made those dreams real. Years later, historians would look back on the transformation of Tombstone, Arizona, from a rough mining town into a thriving, forward-thinking community. And they would marvel at what two people accomplished when they combined vision with determination and love. The buildings still stood, many of them still in use over a century later, testament to the solid engineering principles and innovative designs that Katherine and Thomas Kendrick had developed, and that Katherine and Quinn Zachary had brought to life. But perhaps their greatest legacy was not the buildings or the irrigation systems or the academy. Perhaps their greatest legacy was the example they set, of two people who found each other in the midst of desperation and transformed it into hope, who took dreams that were being sold off for pennies and valued them enough to make them real, who built not just structures of brick and stone, but a partnership of respect and equality and deep, abiding love. The story of the widow who sold her dreams and the visionary cowboy who bought them became part of Tombstone's folklore, passed down through generations. And every time someone stood in the cool shade of the hotel's innovative ventilation system, or drank water from the irrigation channels, or walked through the halls of the academy, they were reminded that dreams, when believed in and worked for with dedication and love, have the power to become real and endure for generations. Katherine and Quinn's love story had started with an auction, with desperation and hope mingling in the Arizona sun. It had grown into something beautiful and lasting, a partnership that changed not just their own lives, but the lives of thousands of people who benefited from their vision and generosity. And in the end, that was perhaps the truest measure of a life well lived. Not just that they had loved each other deeply, though they had. Not just that they had been happy, though they were. But that they had taken their love, their partnership, their combined dreams and talents, and used them to create something that would outlast them, something that would continue to serve and inspire long after they were gone. The dreams had been sold. The visionary cowboy had bought them. And together, they had made them real in ways neither could have accomplished alone. It was a love story, yes, but it was also a story of vision, of courage, of the transformative power of believing in someone and having them believe in you in return. As the sun set over Tombstone one last time in their story, it illuminated the buildings and systems and institutions they had created, casting long shadows across the town that stood as their legacy. And if you listened carefully in the evening quiet, you might almost hear the echo of Katherine's laughter mixing with Quinn's deep voice, the sound of two souls who had found each other against all odds and created something extraordinary together. Their story was complete, their dreams made real, their love eternal. And that was the truest happy ending of all.